My mother-in-law tried to ruin my wedding until my father revealed who actually paid for everything, shocking everyone with the truth. I always imagined my wedding day would be the happiest moment of my life. A beautiful ceremony, my closest friends and family, the man I loved waiting for me at the altar. What I didn't imagine was that the person trying hardest to ruin it would be my own mother-in-law. From the first day I got engaged to Daniel, her son, she never hid her disapproval. She'd throw cutting remarks like, "Are you sure you're ready for this kind of responsibility?" Or, "Marriage is about more than pretty dresses, you know." I brushed it off, thinking it was just nerves or maybe protectiveness. But as the months passed, I realized it was something else. She simply didn't like me and wanted everyone to know it. She interfered with everything. The guest list. She tried to add half of her friends and distant relatives I had never even heard of. The flowers? She scoffed at my choice and attempted to switch them for her favorite lilies. Even the dress. She made a scene at the boutique, loudly whispering that it was too plain for someone marrying her son. Daniel did his best to keep the peace, but I could tell he was torn. He loved me, but he also loved his mother, and she had a way of guilting him into silence. I told myself I could handle it, that it wasn't worth ruining relationships over. But I had no idea how far she was willing to go. The morning of the wedding, everything seemed perfect. My hair was done, my makeup flawless, my dress exactly how I dreamed. Then, as I was about to leave for the ceremony, my maid of honor rushed into the room, pale as a sheet. "You need to see this," she whispered, handing me her phone. On the screen was a post from my mother-in-law's social media. A long, dramatic paragraph about how she was saving her son from a terrible mistake, paired with a photo of me from my bachelorette party, taken completely out of context. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands shook as I tried to process what I was seeing. She had chosen today of all days to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. And worst of all, some guests were already commenting on it, whispering their doubts before the ceremony had even begun. But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for me at the altar. I arrived at the venue with a forced smile, trying not to let anyone see how shaken I was. The music was playing softly, the guests were settling in, and Daniel was waiting at the altar looking nervous, but radiant. He had no idea what his mother had just done. I took a deep breath and walked down the aisle, my father holding my arm firmly. His grip was steady, grounding me when my whole body felt like it was about to collapse. I looked around, noticing whispers among some of the guests, eyes darting between me and Daniel's mother, who sat smugly in the front row, pretending to dab her eyes with a tissue. She looked like the grieving mother of a kidnapped son rather than the parent of a groom at a wedding. When the ceremony began, the officiant spoke warmly, but I could barely hear his words. My mother-in-law's stunt kept replaying in my mind. Was everyone judging me? Did Daniel already know? Would he blame me for the drama his mother created? Halfway through, I noticed my father shifting uncomfortably. He wasn't the type to speak up, but I could tell something was brewing. He had been quiet during the entire engagement, watching the battles between me and Daniel's mother from the sidelines. He never interfered, never offered more than a supportive pat on the shoulder. But that day, something in his expression told me he was done staying silent. Just before the vows, Daniel's mother suddenly stood up. "Wait," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Gasps filled the room. Daniel froze. The officiant looked confused. My heart sank. "This wedding is a mistake," she declared, her voice trembling with fake concern. "My son doesn't understand what he's getting into. She's not the right woman for him. She only cares about appearances, not about building a real marriage. And do you all know who's paying for the spectacle? Not her family. Not her. My son is footing the entire bill, draining himself for her vanity." The room went dead silent. I couldn't breathe. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between me and his mother. And that's when my father let go of my hand, stepped forward, and said the last thing anyone expected. My father's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Calm, steady, but filled with a weight that made every guest turn toward him. "That's not true," he said, his eyes fixed on my mother-in-law. "And you know it." Daniel's mother blinked rapidly, clearly caught off guard. She wasn't expecting resistance, not here, not in public. "Excuse me," she stammered, her voice rising, the fake sorrow cracking into anger. My father took another step forward, standing between us and her. "You want the truth, he said, scanning the room. Fine. Let's talk about who actually paid for this wedding. A murmur ran through the guests. Daniel looked stunned, his hand tightening around mine, as if bracing for impact. All of this, my father gestured around at the decorations, the venue, the catering, was not paid for by Daniel. And certainly not by you. His voice grew louder, stronger. It was paid for by me. Quietly, without asking for recognition. Because I wanted my daughter to have the day she dreamed of, without interference or drama. But you couldn't stand that, could you? You needed to control even this. The room erupted in whispers. My mother-in-law's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. She opened her mouth to protest, but my father didn't let her. For months, I've watched you belittle her, sabotage her choices, and treat her like she wasn't good enough for your son. I stayed quiet, because I thought maybe it was just nerves. Maybe you'd stop once you saw how happy they are together. But today you crossed a line. He turned his gaze directly on her, sharp and unyielding. You tried to humiliate my daughter on her wedding day. And you lied to everyone here. That ends now. Gasps rippled through the guests. My throat tightened as tears filled my eyes. For once, I didn't feel small in her presence. I felt seen, defended. Daniel stood frozen, caught between his mother and me. And I could see it in his eyes. He was realizing things he had never dared to admit. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. All eyes were on Daniel. His mother was trembling with rage, clutching her clutch bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. My father stood tall, his hand still raised slightly, as if daring anyone to question him. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice low, directed at his mother. She hesitated, her lips parting, then closing again. It was the hesitation that betrayed her. Everyone could see it, the cracks in her act. I was only trying to protect you," she said finally, her voice pitched high, with false sincerity. "Protect me from what?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "From the woman I love. From the family who actually supported us." He shook his head slowly, disbelief clouding his face. "All this time, you made me think I was carrying everything alone. That we couldn't afford this wedding. That she was being reckless. But it was a lie." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some glaring at his mother. My chest ached watching Daniel's expression, anger, betrayal, hurt, all mixing together. "I thought you cared about me," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "But this wasn't about me. It was about control. You wanted to make her look small." My mother-in-law's face contorted. "She's not right for you," she blurted, her composure shattering. "She'll ruin your life." "No," Daniel cut her off, his voice louder now. "The only one ruining anything right now is you." A stunned hush fell again. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel had stood up to her in front of everyone. My heart pounded, my throat thick with unshed tears. My father reached for my hand and placed it back into Daniel's. It was such a simple gesture, but felt like a bridge, one generation telling the next, "Stand your ground." Daniel's mother sank back into her chair, her shoulders rigid, her lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. But the damage was done. Her carefully built image was cracking before the very people she wanted to impress. And just when I thought the chaos might settle, another guest stood up from the second row, clearing his throat. It was Daniel's uncle, a tall man with silver hair and a sharp gaze. He rose slowly, tugging at his suit jacket, and looked directly at my mother-in-law. "I think it's time someone else speaks," he said, his voice firm but calm. The room quieted again. "We've all seen this behavior for years. The controlling, the manipulations, the way you twist every situation to make yourself the victim." His eyes narrowed. "But today, publicly humiliating your own son and his bride? That's too far." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd, quiet murmurs, nods, even a few gasps. My mother-in-law stiffened in her seat, eyes darting nervously between the faces around her. "You always talk about family honor," the uncle continued, his voice gaining strength. "But what you did today brought shame, not honor. Shame on you." The words landed heavy, and for once, she had no comeback. Her lips trembled as though she might lash out again, but nothing came. She looked cornered. Daniel gripped my hand tighter. I glanced at him, and he gave me a small, broken smile. The kind that said, "I see everything now. I'm sorry." The officiant, clearly rattled, tried to regain control of the ceremony. "Perhaps we should continue," he suggested softly. But before we could move on, my father spoke again, this time addressing the guests. "I didn't intend to say anything today. I just wanted to watch my daughter get married in peace. But since the truth is out, let me make something clear. Every part of this wedding, from the venue to the smallest detail, was given as a gift. Not to show off, not to control, but because I love my daughter. And because Daniel is now part of our family." He turned to Daniel, his expression softening. "And son, if you choose her, you will never carry this weight alone. Not with us." I saw Daniel's eyes fill with tears. He looked at my father as if seeing him for the first time, not just as the man who raised me, but as the man who would stand beside us as family. My mother-in-law sat frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling. She had lost the room. Everyone knew it. Still, part of me wondered, was this really the end of her interference? Or was she already planning her next move, even as the ceremony continued? The officiant cleared his throat, his voice a little shaky, but determined. "Shall we proceed with the vows?" he asked gently, glancing between Daniel and me. I nodded, swallowing hard, my heart racing. Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes locked on mine. For the first time that day, I felt the chaos melt away. It was just us, two people standing against everything that had tried to divide us. Daniel went first. His voice trembled at the beginning, but with every word he grew stronger. "I thought today would be about fear. Fear of disappointing people, fear of failing. But looking at you now, I realize it's about something bigger. Love that doesn't bend under pressure. Love that stands in front of everyone and says, 'This is my choice. I choose you, and I will keep choosing you, no matter what storms we face.'" Tears blurred my vision. Guests dabbed their eyes with tissues. Even the officiant looked moved. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "I always feared I wouldn't be enough, for you, for your family, for anyone. But you've shown me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. And today, with everyone watching, I promise to show up for you. Every single day, in every single way." There was a silence in the room after I finished, a heavy, emotional pause before the officiant finally said, "By the power vested in me." And then the words we had waited for, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Daniel leaned in, his hands framing my face, and when his lips touched mine, the room erupted in applause. Cheers, clapping, even whistles. It was overwhelming. But as I pulled back, still dizzy from the kiss, I caught sight of my mother-in-law. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't smiling. She sat stiff, her eyes narrow, her lips curled into something between bitterness and quiet fury. And in that moment, a chill ran down my spine, because I realized the battle might be over, but the war with her was far from won. The reception began with laughter and music, the kind of celebration I had always dreamed about. The hall glowed with warm lights, the tables adorned with flowers I had chosen, roses and wild greenery, elegant but simple. Guests mingled, clinking glasses, congratulating us with genuine smiles. For the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe. Daniel and I sat at the sweetheart table, holding hands under the linen, whispering little things to each other that no one else could hear. It felt perfect. But perfection never lasts long when she's around. Daniel's mother sat at a table nearby, her posture stiff, her face frozen in that tight smile she wore whenever she wanted to appear polite but was seething inside. For most of the evening, she kept quiet, sipping her wine, watching me like a hawk. I tried to ignore her. Then came the speeches. My maid of honor gave a heartfelt toast that had everyone tearing up. Daniel's best man followed, making the room erupt with laughter. Then, without being invited, Daniel's mother rose to her feet, glass in hand. The clinking sound of her fork against the glass cut through the room. "If I may," she began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I'd like to say a few words about this union." Daniel shifted in his seat, his hand tightening around mine. I felt my stomach knot. She raised her glass, her eyes sweeping across the crowd before landing on me. Marriage is a serious responsibility. It requires sacrifice, patience, and the ability to truly understand your partner's world. My son was raised in a family of strong values, of high standards. And I only hope his new wife, her voice lingered on the words like a blade, is ready to rise to those expectations. A murmur rippled through the guests. My cheeks burned. Daniel pushed back his chair, ready to stand, but before he could, my father rose again. Calm, collected, but this time with a fire in his eyes I had rarely seen. Actually, he said firmly, lifting his own glass, if we're talking about values, let's toast to the ones that matter most: honesty, loyalty, and respect. Because without those, no amount of high standards will ever hold a family together. The room applauded. Some guests even stood, clinking their glasses in support. My mother-in-law sat down slowly, her face flushed with humiliation. For the second time that day, she had lost control of the narrative. But as the applause faded and the music resumed, I caught the sharpness in her eyes. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The music softened, and the DJ announced it was time for our first dance. Daniel led me to the center of the floor, his hand steady on mine, his smile warm enough to melt away the tension of the night. The lights dimmed, and the soft glow of fairy lights wrapped around the room made it feel like magic. As the first notes of our chosen song filled the air, Daniel pulled me close. For a moment, it was just us. The noise, the whispers, the glares from his mother, all faded. Guests watched with misty eyes, some swaying along, some taking photos. It was the moment I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. But then, as if on cue, I saw movement near the DJ booth. Daniel's mother had stood up, her heels clicking sharply across the floor. She leaned in close to the DJ, whispering something with a tight smile. The song stuttered, skipped, and suddenly cut off. A loud, upbeat tune blasted through the speakers. Not romantic, not elegant, something completely inappropriate for a first dance. The crowd looked around in confusion, some chuckling awkwardly. I froze. Daniel's grip on my waist tightened. His face flushed red, and he turned toward the booth, clearly seeing what I had seen. His mother standing there, smirking faintly, pretending it was all just a mistake. Before panic could settle in, my father was already moving. He strode to the booth, exchanged a few firm words with the DJ, and within seconds, our original song returned. The room cheered, clapping to encourage us, as if to erase the awkward interruption. Daniel looked at me, his jaw tense, but his eyes full of apology. "Ignore her," he whispered. "Tonight is ours." I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder. As we swayed together, the guests joined in, filling the dance floor, the earlier tension dissolving in music and laughter. But as I looked over Daniel's shoulder, I caught his mother's gaze. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She was glaring at me with pure defiance, as if silently promising this wasn't the end of her war. And for the first time that night, I realized her anger wasn't just about me marrying her son. It was about losing her power. The night had flowed back into joy after the dance. Laughter returned, glasses clinked, and for a brief stretch of time, it felt like the storm had passed. Daniel and I moved from table to table, thanking our guests, hugging relatives, soaking in the warmth that had been missing earlier. Then came the cake. A towering, elegant creation with delicate white frosting and golden accents. It was one of the few details I had refused to compromise on, something I had dreamed of since childhood. The guests gathered around, cameras ready. Daniel placed his hand over mine on the silver knife, smiling as the room cheered. Together, we sliced into the cake, the moment sweet and symbolic. But just as the servers began preparing plates for the guests, a shrill voice cut through the air. "Wait." My mother-in-law pushed her way toward the table, her eyes blazing. "This cake is poisoned with lies." The room went silent. I felt my heart drop, my stomach turning cold. Daniel froze, his hand still holding the knife. She pointed at me with a trembling finger. "Do you all really think she's the perfect little bride? She's been hiding things from you, from all of us." Gasps spread through the room. My face burned, though I had no idea what she was even talking about. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, his voice hard, low, but shaking with restrained fury. She turned on him, her voice cracking. "She didn't pay for any of this. She couldn't. And you'll find out soon enough that she'll drag you down, just like she drags everyone around her. She'll bleed you dry, Daniel." I heard a few people muttering uncomfortably. She wanted to plant doubt, to stain the night with her venom. But before I could even respond, my father stepped forward again, slow, deliberate, his face calm but his eyes sharp as steel. He placed his hand firmly on my shoulder, then turned to the crowd. "She's right about one thing," he said, his voice echoing through the hushed room. "My daughter didn't pay for this wedding." A collective gasp swept the guests. My mother-in-law's face lit with triumph, just for a split second. Then my father continued, his voice steady and proud. "I did. Every single penny. Not because she couldn't. Not because she's weak. But because she's my daughter, and I wanted to give her the wedding she deserved. I didn't tell anyone because it wasn't about recognition. It was about love. And love doesn't keep score." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to my mother-in-law, whose triumphant smirk had collapsed into stunned humiliation. And at that moment, Daniel released my hand, only to wrap his arms tightly around me, turning to face his mother with a finality I hadn't seen before. Daniel stood tall, his arm around me, his eyes locked on his mother. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the steel in it. "Enough," he said. The single word cut sharper than anything else spoken that night. "You've embarrassed yourself, you've embarrassed me, and worst of all, you tried to ruin the happiest day of my life. I won't let you do this anymore." His mother's lips parted, trembling as if to protest, but Daniel didn't give her the chance. "For years, I let you control me. I let you convince me you always knew best. But today, you crossed every line. You didn't just attack her, you attacked us. And if you can't accept that she's my wife, that she's part of my life now, then maybe you shouldn't be part of it either." The room fell utterly silent. Some guests lowered their eyes, others stared in disbelief. My father squeezed my shoulder gently, as if to say it's over now. His mother's face crumbled. The rage, the pride, the bitterness, it all cracked into something almost pitiful. She opened her mouth again, but this time no words came out. She sat down heavily, as though the weight of her own defeat had finally caught up with her. Daniel turned back to me, cupping my face with both hands. "This is our day," he whispered, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "Not hers." I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, but this time they weren't from humiliation or fear. They were from relief, from love, from the realization that he had chosen us, publicly, firmly, without hesitation. The guests erupted into applause once more, louder than before, drowning out the bitterness that had tainted the evening. The music swelled, laughter returned, and when Daniel kissed me again, it felt like the final seal on everything we had fought for. That night, as we danced surrounded by friends and family who truly wished us well, I glanced across the room. My mother-in-law sat quietly, isolated at her table, her glass of wine untouched. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. And for the first time since I'd met her, I felt no fear of her schemes. Because she had lost. She had lost the battle, and more importantly, she had lost the control she clung to for so long. What she didn't know, what maybe she'd never understand, was that love, real love, can't be broken by pride or bitterness. It only grows stronger when tested. And as I leaned into Daniel's arms, I knew we had already won.